the Minister of CoGTA have forwarded his apology. Hence, he requested Dr. Masimula to lead the delegation. And on the side of the committee, Honorable Molokome, she's still not well. I think we have that standing apology in these days, and we wish her a speedy recovery. Can we get an indication, Mr. Manele, if there are any apologies?
Chairperson, thank you very much. We have covered all the official tabled apologies. For now, we have received only those 2 apologies. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you. Without any further ado, I'll request the Deputy Minister to take the podium so that he can be able to make it to the other event, but he will also come back and rejoin the meeting after addressing Salga. Over to you, Dr. Masim.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson of the committee, and a very good morning to members of the committee and all senior officials in attendance. Firstly, let me just apologize, as you have said, Honorable Chair, that I'm scheduled to give a keynote address here at the Salga National Communicators Conference. And of course, immediately after that, I will come back to join this meeting. But be that as it may, I am with Dr. Naidu and other senior officials from the department to come and take the committee through a very important process which we have been preoccupied with for almost a year now. This appearance before the committee this morning, through the presentation which Dr. Naidu will make, will be able to give an account of the work done since the minister was able to issue a notice in the government gazette of calling for public inputs and involvement and participation when the review of the 1998 white paper policy process. And of course, a number of milestones were set right from that first day up to a point when we were able to get significant number of submissions and reflections by many South Africans in their individual capacities, but as well as through their organized formations, out of which 266 submissions were received by the project steering committee, which is working very closely with Dr. Naidu, administratively and politically been overseen by the ministry as the political leadership of the department. That process, Honorable Chairperson, has been worked very closely in terms of synthesizing almost all the submissions, and a final draft document was therefore then released by the committee which served before the ministry for adoption endorsement so that it could be released for public comments. At this point in time, we are still very hard at work, working towards meeting the deadline which we have set for ourselves and committed to National Cabinet, and His Excellency in particular, that by the end of March, we should be able to come back to National Cabinet for the approval of the reviewed white paper policy, which will therefore then become a blueprint policy transformation to advance and guide further transformation of local government in the country. And therefore, at this point in time, given the management plan or a roadmap that we have developed, we have got a very limited time within which broader consultations have got to take place, including meeting ordinary South Africans, so that the final proposals that are emerging, which Dr. Naidu will be able to take the committee through, we are able to solicit further views, advices, comments. And of course, this committee is very central as one of the key portfolios in the national parliament in the national sphere of government for us to come and account on how best to together through your leadership, Honorable Chairperson, we can be in a better position to further process those emerging policy pointers and proposals so that by the time they are concretized as the final policy that will guide this sphere going forward, all of us would have had an opportunity, and through your leadership, you would have guided the process to its logical conclusion. And be that as it may, I would therefore like to take this opportunity to say the minister is occupied while they're attending cabinet, and we are here to take the committee through that first process. The second related process on the review on the funding model of local government through the Inter-Ministerial Committee, working together with the National Department of Treasury and SALGA. There is preliminary work that has started, which I suppose Dr. Naidu, as part of presenting these broad areas of the policy proposals, how they are beginning to emerge, which pointing into different proposals. He should be able to make reference to a process that is underway, jointly managed by ourselves, SALGA, and as well as the National Treasury, which of course mainly is a National Treasury process. We are cooperatively working together with them, but it is the primary mandate and responsibility of National Treasury. Cooperatively and collectively, we are therefore in the same space working together towards that process. But it is an integral part of this broad policy review process. So Dr. Naidu will be in a better position to basically also make reference to that policy process. I think broadly, Chair, that's what I could say in summary, that we are more than very ready to take the committee through what has emerged out of a very elaborate, broad consultative process, which will actually occasion this process towards its logical conclusion. And therefore, let me take this opportunity to thank you, Chairperson, for your indulgence to allow me to go and perform this task on behalf of the ministry. And thereafter, I'll come back and rejoin the meeting while in progress. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I think that's what I could say for now at this point.
Thank you, Doc, and we wish you all the best in that engagement. We'll welcome you back when you are done. You can now be at liberty to take leave. Thank you. Honorable members, can we deal with the consideration and adoption of the agenda? I know we've already started, but formally, can we adopt the agenda? Honorable Mwimang?
I formally move, Chair, that the agenda be adopted as tabled. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Whip. Any seconder?
Second, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Makasini and Honorable Cesar. Thank you very much. The agenda is now duly adopted for our consumption. Honorable members, you'll recall that there's been a number of calls made by the members of the public, different stakeholders, to see to it that the municipalities work as expected, as envisaged, in terms of good governance, good administration, so that services to our communities will be delivered in an effective and efficient manner. So this has led to a situation where the president, after those calls, in his State of the Nation address, committed that is going to direct the Minister of Cooperative Governance in the Republic of South Africa to initiate this process of the review of white paper on local government, which SALGA have been calling for quite a long period as well. And even when we met with SALGA at our NCOP debates, this is the point they've been making, including our three-sphere engagement forum, which have been convened by the NCOP. These were the calls made. As a result, now the process has been initiated and will allow the department to present, as we have had, the Deputy Minister engaging on that. But there are fundamental questions. Part of those fundamental questions that will need to be addressed. How do you fund this sphere so that this sphere is able to retain competent employees? They don't rely on people without competency since they are unable to afford salaries to cater for that. So the issue of service delivery, which have been crippled by non-availability in many small municipalities of schemes. You find that municipalities are functioning without technical director, and they only have HR and other units, which does not really deal with service delivery directly to our citizens. So these were the fundamental issues: the remuneration of employees, categories, which have been differing from one municipality to another. In terms of categories, how do we deal with that? And how do we deal with the issue of engagement of Amakosi as well in the work that municipalities are doing, especially on spatial development framework to totally integrate traditional authority areas into municipal mapping, so that they are not left out even in terms of town planning schemes that are developed. They also apply them in the areas where Amakosi resides with their communities. So these are the fundamental issues, including the question of insourcing employees. In other municipalities, the issue have been raised. Some have been taking one another to courts to insource employees, but insourcing, is it the solution? If it's the solution, how do you finance it so that you are able to finance it properly? But if it's not the 100% solution, what are other alternatives that will need to be looked at in that respect? So with that, honorable members, let me allow Dr. Naidu to come in to actually present on the review of what paper on local government 1998. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Naidu. Dr. Naidu, are you there?
Yes, I'm just trying to share my screen, Honorable
Okay.
Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, it's coming now.
This is me, just to show that I'm not a bot on the other side. Honorable Chair, good morning to you. Good morning to the other honorable members of the committee, the Honorable Deputy Minister. Our Director General is also in the meeting, Mr. Mbulelo Changana. Chair, the second component of the presentation, which deals with the funding model for local government, is a component that deals with inputs from the National Treasury. I want to apologize for them not being in the meeting. It is budget day, so they are consumed with activities in relation to that. We have our colleague from Salga that has joined us, so that component would be properly represented by ourselves and our colleagues from organized local government. As is indicated in the agenda, there's two components to the presentation. The first, dealing with the review of the white paper on local government, and then the second, dealing with the funding model for local government. I will, as is suggested, Chair, in the agenda, after dealing with the first component, the Part A, pause, hand back to the Chair, and if the Chair is of the view I should proceed with Part B, I will take guidance. So the presentation is structured thus. First component deals with various aspects of the work that we have begun to do on the review of the white paper. We will indicate the various project milestones, the pillars that underpin the work that we are dealing with. Share a little bit of some of the policy shifts, 9 in total, that we would look at, how we intend to ensure momentum is kept through a transition management body, and then the implementation agenda, and then how we intend to finalize the white paper review. The second component will start with a problem statement that references the entire review of the funding model for local government, work that SALGA had led on, supported by the department, some of the study findings, touch on the local government equitable share. What are some of the core messages emanating from the study? And then also touch on the National Treasury review that has commenced towards the latter part of last year. We start the component A, Honorable Chairperson, by referencing the statements made by His Excellency, the President in SONA 2025, and to say that many of the challenges and this is a direct quote from the President's speech, many of the challenges in municipalities arise from the design of our local government system. We will therefore undertake extensive consultation to develop an updated white paper on local government, to outline a modern and fit-for-purpose local government system. We will review the funding model for municipalities, as many of them do not have a viable and sustainable revenue base. Just over 2 weeks, or just about 2 weeks ago, in the President's SONA of this year, the President stated that we are now taking collective action. Learning from our experience of the past 30 years, we will in the coming months finalize a revised white paper on local government. This will provide solutions for the functioning of an effective local government system. The white paper will reimagine the way that local government works. These changes may be difficult, but they must be done. Honorable Chair, we have stayed the course, and you will see in the slides to follow the various milestones that we had plotted and how we have, to a large extent, adhered to that. So just to close out the background and the introduction, the deadline for the revised white paper is the end of March, end of the financial year, and that the first draft that we have developed already contains approximately 65 recommendations in 11 chapters of the revised white paper document. And this, we would want to show how it would drive local government system change over the next 5 years. The proposed recommendations and policy shifts will be further developed through structured engagement with sector stakeholders and the public. So what was the purpose in the main of the white paper review? Firstly, it is a system-wide reset for local government to basically assess how the system has performed against the intent of the 1998 white paper and set out a refreshed policy framework for the next phase of reform. We also want to ensure that we have a realistic agenda for change, but to also modernize and guide reforms across the full system. And that system, the components thereof would include governance, institutional arrangements, administration, finance, service delivery options, so that local government can meet constitutional and legislative mandates. And then lastly, to also balance ambition with delivery. And to ensure that that is balanced, we want to propose short and long-term policy shifts while insisting on improvement in the basics and consistent enforcement of the rule of law across the system. The next slide references where we started. We identified 12 key milestones across the two phases that we had identified. You would see that in July to September of 2024, the project concept was approved. Milestone 6, we had developed a draft discussion document, which we had published in the Government Gazette. I think it was on the 10th of April last year. Subjected that to further consultation and then also commissioning specialist research papers. We're now at the point, and I would say milestone 11, where we are consulting, and that the first draft paper, white paper, to be finalized by February, but then the outer marker being the March 2026 deadline in milestone 12. We identified these 5 pillars for local government reform, and the first being that we would want to have one local government system without fragmented sectors and spheres. Secondly, we want to have clean and capable governance, informed by ethical leadership, minimum competencies, a clearer separation of political and administrative roles, improved coalition stability, but also zero tolerance for corruption backed by real consequences. The third pillar that we've identified is differentiation and a pathway to a single tier future. So that is an approach, an option in relation to a single tier future, but to move beyond a one-size-fits-all, introduce a new categorization framework, clarify and align powers and functions, and also enable 2 reform pathways, including transition options over time. The fourth pillar is based on partnership relational governance and to shift from compliance participation to partnering with citizens. And then the fifth pillar being financial and service delivery reform for viability. We believe that the finance follows function needs to be embedding the way in which we do our work in the future to fix own revenue erosion and collection, adjust grants, and eliminate unfunded mandates. And I suppose the part B of the presentation would delve a little deeper into that part, into that pillar. This interlocking pieces of the puzzle shows our current reality and a case for change. We start by acknowledging that not all aspects of the local government system are failing. There are elements that should be strengthened and used as part of best practice to inform subsequent phases. Evidence has also shown that there is declining and uneven performance, but also that the system is misaligned with the constitutional objectives and the 1998 white paper, which had made assumptions that we find now are incorrect. The core challenges include system design limitations, governance and integrity failures, as well as weakened finances, but then that the white paper should also offer practical solutions for change. We believe that the review should advance practical, short and long-term reforms that strengthen basic functionality. So how does the report shape up? We have before us a report that is broken down into 11 different chapters, and then also having annexures thereto that would indicate the legal and constitutional implications, but also a high-level transition map. I'm not going to go into what those chapters are because they are also expressed in the slides to follow. So the first chapter is why this white paper review now? What does it aim to achieve, and how will it achieve that? So you will see in the next slides, Honorable Chairperson and honorable members of the committee, the various chapters, the policy proposals that are in this draft white paper, and I want to emphasize that it is a draft white paper, draft policy proposals, which would still need to be subjected to further debate, discussion, and interrogation. So in chapter 2, which deals with the institutional system, looking at revised categories and differentiated powers and functions, an approach deals with a single tier local government with new categories. And if there is a single tier, that would be accompanied with relevant constitutional amendments, constitutional changes. There would need to be criteria for categories, how categories would be decided, as well as a review and dispute resolution mechanism in place. Another approach to this chapter, that focus area, is to maintain the two tiers and build a framework for differentiation. And that differentiation, Honorable Chair, could mean that you would have more Category A municipalities outside of metropolitan areas. You would want to differentiate between district and local municipalities according to national policy. Chapter 3 deals with cooperative governance, IGR, and planning for collective impact. And some of the policy proposals that are coming out in this chapter is to establish a national policy coordination center, to provide for an authoritative powers and functions map, to provide for multi-sphere planning, but to also establish a system for single data. This chapter also deals with creating binding cooperative governance protocols for service delivery in local geographies. Chapter 4 deals with the political system, leadership, ethics, anti-corruption, and accountability. And some of the proposals that are coming out in this chapter deals with providing for ethical leadership through a governance code, to entrench the provisions that we already have in the Code of Conduct for councillors, to provide for minimum competencies for council leaders, to provide for public performance contracts for mayors and members of mayoral committees and for executive committees, to provide for coalition governance rules and public coalition agreements. And then lastly, to see how we would want to strengthen oversight through the impacts and audit committees that we have in municipalities. Chapter 5 deals with the administrative system in itself, to see how we depoliticize and provide for capable and digital enhanced municipalities through professionalization of the senior municipal leadership, and to coordinate a system-wide capacity and professional developmental pathway. Chapter 6 deals with citizen and community relations and how we move from participation to collaboration and partnering. And some of the policy proposals, as indicated on the slide, is a move from consultation and participation to collaborative governance, improving ward-level participation, but also to ensure we undertake civic education and inclusive communities. We have a chapter that deals with the institution of traditional and Khoisan leadership to improve relations between the elected and the traditional leadership institution, and to do so by having binding local compacts to have enforceable spatial planning procedures, and to ensure that we have collaboration at the ward level being institutionalized. Chapter 8, which deals with municipal finance, some of the proposals that we have is to ensure that we differentiate better amongst municipalities to adjust the grant system, to improve own revenue collection, to enhance borrowing at competitive rates, and other mechanisms to attract private investment, to address unfunded and underfunded mandates, something which would also be expressed in Part B of the presentation, but then also to expand and improve national provincial ability to monitor municipalities and intervene where needed. Chapter 9 deals with service delivery and infrastructure, and some of the policy proposals that are coming out are providing or to ensure that we introduce a more flexibility in the system of service provision, to improve the financial viability of trading services, revise the fiscal framework to strengthen incentives, to define affordability for better indigent targeting, and then to also prioritize technical capability and skills. Chapter 10 deals with spatial transformation, economic growth, and resilience. And some of the proposals in this chapter deals with making the One Plan a binding municipal-led spatial transformation compact to address fragmented development approvals, to implement a framework for disposal of strategically located public land, to ensure that we have regional partnerships aligned to Chapter 3 of the Constitution, clarify and operationalize governance in traditional authority areas, make climate risk integration enforceable, but then to also treat ecological infrastructure as core municipal infrastructure and embed stewardship in asset management and budgeting. The next slide gives a sense of some of the policy shifts. We've lifted out 9 such policy shifts, and we've put it in as follows. So the first shift we say should be from developmental local government to development governance. So while in 1998, municipalities were positioned as primary drivers of local development, we would want to shift towards a scenario where we have stronger emphasis on shared responsibility across spheres and partners for outcomes in place. Policy shift 2 deals with from broadly uniform municipal design to differentiation. And we believe that going into the future, we should have differentiated approaches, be it for powers, compliance expectations, and support, but this must be linked to capability and context with performance-based graduation pathways. Moving from cooperative governance as coordination to collective impact, we've identified as shift 3, and we would want to, going into the future, have clearer and binding obligations, delivery accountability, and system redesign to ensure the right scale for planning, funding, and delivery. From participation as process to partnering as practice is another policy shift that we've identified. And we would want to, going into the future, have structured partnering with communities, civil society, and business as an ongoing way of governing, and for it not to be just a compliance step. To move from governance designed for majorities to explicit coalition governance rules, we want to go into the future saying that there should be clearer rules, there should be clearer norms for coalition stability and transparency, including formal agreements and limits on disruptive motions. And if one has regard to the coalitions bill that we had published for comments, these are some of the things that have found expression in that bill. To move from a general role separation to tighter political administrative boundary enforcement, and going into the future, we would want to see how we have standardized delegations, clearer norms, and stronger enforcement to reduce interference and improve accountability. The last of the policy shifts, so we say that to move from good governance aspirations to integrity by design and consequences. In the 1998 white paper, there was emphasis around good governance and performance. But going into the future, we would want to see how we have stronger oversight, architecture, and consequence systems, lending itself to improving integrity, accountability, and audit follow through. To move from training-led capacity building to professionalization and politicization and depoliticization. In the 1998 white paper, we had building capacity largely through systems rollout and skills development, whereas going into the future, we want to have a professionalization municipal administration with clearer merit-based capability expectations and reduced politicization of the administration. Lastly, Honorable Chair, to move from a paper-based administration to digital reform. So while in 1998, it was more compliance and systems in a mostly paper manual environment, we want to keep up with the times. Going into the future, we would want to have an emphasis on a municipal digital backbone to strengthen records, audit trails, asset management, transparency, and service responsiveness. So how do we ensure that all of that which we are proposing in the review, we keep the momentum and we move from adoption to implementation to protect that momentum that we've gathered already and to drive collaborative delivery rather than having parallel efforts? So we want to say, firstly, we want to establish a transition body. So to ensure that we have an initial term of at least 2 years for this transition management body, but for it to be inclusive, drawing expertise from the spheres of government, organized local government, and then key social partners. It should not be a formal center of authority. It will not take away statutory mandates of departments, spheres, or institutions, but acts as an implementation steward so that progress is sequenced, coordinated, and aligned with mutual accountability for implementing mandates. We should also note that earlier on in the presentation, I made reference to a local government policy coordination center. It's not the same as that. So this transition management body will be time-bound, focusing on delivery of those recommendations that will be coming out of the white paper on local government. In terms of the implementation agenda, we've identified 2 broad areas. So running up until the end of the first term, well, the next term of local government, we would want to focus on improving local government performance within the current constitutional framework through reforms to roles, powers and functions, accountability, professionalization, digitalization, finance, service delivery, etc. And then the period post that, post 2021, we would want to pursue constitutional reforms to redesign the system, of course, informed by that which would be said in the reviewed white paper, including perhaps a single-tier differentiated local government model, a rules-based allocation of powers and functions, and a revised fiscal framework aligned to the new system. I'll speak a little bit more about powers and functions in the next component of the presentation. Lastly, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable members of the committee, we would want to gazette the draft white paper that we have concluded, subject it to public consultation, and to implement as soon as possible to ensure sufficient time to process comments and incorporate useful suggestions coming through those submissions. And then to ensure that this is also informed by a political process to ensure that government and all the other administrative processes are adhered to, engage practitioners, and then also have strategic discussions on outstanding issues. Honorable Chair, that is the first part of the presentation dealing with the status update on the review of the white paper. I'm going to pause here as I get into the second component and ask of the Chair for guidance as to whether I should proceed, pause, and enable discussion, but I will hear from the Honorable Chairperson. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Naidu. Welcome to DG and the entire team. Honorable members, what is the good approach? Do you think we can have an engagement now here, or we can combine the presentation and engage all of them together? What are your views? Let me take hands. Honorable Zimande.
No, Chair, I suggest let's combine the two.
Any different view?
No, Chair, I
Right.
second the Honourable Demandi's request.
Thank you. You are all in agreement. Dr. Naidu can proceed, then we'll discuss later.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. We start the second part of the presentation on the review of the funding model, Honorable Chair, by stating the problem. So firstly, that local government's fiscal framework is structurally misaligned with municipal revenue capacity, with own revenue covering only 60% of recurrent expenditure. And in the study that was undertaken by Salga and Dihag, this was found to be the case in the 2018, 2019, and 2020, 2021 financial years, against an unassumed or an assumed 90% that was made in the 1998 white paper. Thirdly, there's a significant vertical fiscal gap that has emerged, and that the 9.9% share of the equitable share presently is insufficient to close this fiscal gap, undermining municipal fiscal sustainability, and of course that having an impact on service delivery obligations. It was also at the local government summit that was held in September 2022, where Salga was tasked to explore options and scenarios to review the funding model for local government. And this work, Honorable Chair, was concluded towards last year. We want to also then indicate what were some of the key assumptions that underpinned the study that was undertaken, but also some of the questions that were asked in the study. So firstly, the first assumption was that it relied on the income distribution from Census 2011. It looked at the top 15% of municipalities spending adequately on the provision of services, that fiscus and transfers grow at economic growth rate, that service backlogs will be eliminated by 2030, and that the number of SSEG installations will double up to 2026. How much more efficient can local government be? To what degree is expenditure constrained? How much are unfunded and underfunded mandates costing local government? How much more revenue can local government raise? Were the key questions that the study also looked at. So the study is also informed by following. So to calculate the required increase in the vertical allocation of revenue, that is the transfer gap, right? So this would be the ideal setup where your own revenues plus the transfers would deal with adequate expenditure to run service delivery. That isn't the ideal situation. We are not there. What we find is that there is a transfer gap and then a fiscal effort gap that, if filled, will ensure that we have an ideal municipality. So these calculations were undertaken for the period 2022 to 2031 using the municipal services finance model. It was also important that we reference, Honorable Chair, the local government equitable share. And you would see that the formula for the local government equitable share is referenced in this slide. It shows the cost of services provision, but also to indicate that some of the key findings from the review suggested, one, that the basic services component generally covers and often exceeds the cost of providing basic services. But the public services component of the equitable share is structurally underfunded, that metros receive little to no public services funding. Rural and poorer municipalities, however, receive proportionally higher equitable share allocations, but this does not fully offset overall underfunding of local governments. It also found that the equitable share is relatively equitable in distribution, but inadequate in overall size to enable municipalities to fulfill their mandates. It concluded by saying that the equitable share formula broadly achieves horizontal equity. So the distribution horizontally is probably okay, but the vertical share of national revenue allocated to local government is insufficient, and we will come to figures that are proposed later on in the presentation. So as part of the findings on the vertical division of revenue, and this specifically dealing with efficiency, you will see that bloated overheads, if you address that, you could have a potential saving of 33 billion rand. On non-revenue water, possible 2.4 billion rand, on electricity, 20 billion rand, and then on fruitless and wasteful expenditure, just about 1.7 billion rand. So this is a very topical issue also, Honorable Chairperson, the issue of unfunded or underfunded mandates. And we reference the services of libraries, public health, housing, security services, and environmental protection. And we indicate here what could be potential savings for municipalities if these services were properly located, maybe, but also properly funded. Still on the vertical division of revenue and the revenue fiscal efforts, we believe that there are several different ways of enhancing municipal revenues. The potential revenue from some of these, such as reducing non-revenue water, the figure I indicated in the previous slide, and electricity, are relatively quite perhaps simple to calculate, but the potential of other methods, such as improving the completeness of valuation roles or revising service tariffs, are quite difficult to estimate in aggregate because of affordability issues. So if you look at on your right-hand side table, there were the expenditure items ranging from improved metering, going down to increased development charges, the potential revenue that could still be collected by municipalities if these were addressed appropriately. So this slide indicates the overall assessment of the funding model. And it indicates, so this 150 billion rand indicates the transfer gap. So at current levels of revenue, that is what is estimated to be the transfer gap. The transfer gap, even if municipalities raise an additional 28% in revenue through increased fiscal effort, a gap of 58 billion rand still remains. So to close this gap, the local government share of the fiscus would need to increase from the present 9.9% of the fiscus to between 13.5% and 18.8%. So the moderate revenue potential scenario represents a perhaps reasonable compromise, allocating an additional 133 billion rand per annum to local governments, and that would represent an increase of 74%. What are some of the core messages emanating from this study, Honorable Chairperson and honorable members of the committee? So that local government's crisis is structural, not only managerial. The fiscal framework is based on outdated assumptions. Efficiency and revenue reforms alone will not be able to close the gap. There needs to be a material increase in national transfers, and that is just unavoidable. That infrastructure underinvestment is perhaps the biggest long-term risk. It would appear that the equitable share design is broadly sound, but the quantum and alignment are inadequate. Lastly, without reform, service delivery will decline and the economic drag will intensify. This slide references the recommendations from the study. It is not all of the recommendations. We pulled out those we believe were most pertinent, and you would see that there are specific responsibilities that are recommended for the National Treasury, SALGA, as well as the department. Firstly, for the Treasury to consider revising the local government allocation from the 9.9% to 17.8%. The Treasury should commission a national analysis of affordability, or the ability to pay, for municipal services. That the National Treasury should consider the distribution of a portion of the fuel levy currently allocated to the national sphere to non-metro municipalities, providing the roads function. That SALGA should support the rationalization of operating grants and capital grants. That the department should conclude the review of the district powers and functions. This is work that has commenced already in the department. It is work that would extend over a period of 2 years, and we would want to see how that would fit into the review of the white paper, the first component of this presentation. For SALGA should investigate alternative mechanisms for centralized or pooled revenue collection. For SALGA to pursue the case for courts to assert the municipal executive authority over the electricity reticulation function. This is what the report said. But then that SALGA should advise its members on how to establish ring-fenced utilities to be able to quantify the cost of supplies, set tariffs appropriately, and allocate revenues to the functions for which they were collected. The next slide begins to touch on the work that is being led by the National Treasury. Of course, we are active participants in this review together with SALGA. So firstly, why? The first why is that the equity and the fairness of the vertical division of revenue is highly contested. So to note that local government received the smallest share, the quantum of functions performed by local government, the appropriateness of the cost factors used for the equitable share, adequacy of conditional grants, but also the diminishing ability to raise revenue. So we also need to note that there is a fixed fiscal envelope. So there's going to have to be winners and losers in relation to how the vertical division of revenue is addressed. On financial management failures, the adoption of unfunded budgets. Treasury has identified 157 municipalities that are in financial distress. 225 meet the MA criteria for financial problems. There's a high level of outstanding creditors, persistent underspending of capital budgets, inadequate spending on asset management, the adoption of unfunded budgets again, and adverse audit findings. The third war is on performance, leadership, and management failures. We note the service delivery failures, the failure to prudently manage fiscal resources, failing in their leadership functions, and the failing in governance functions. So what is the scope of this review? There are 26 different questions that are part of the terms of reference that has been put together for the study. We've lifted out some of the key questions, some of the second level questions, and the third level questions that are part of the terms of reference. So around the key questions that we're asking is the allocation to local governments. Is the quantum of the national raised revenue allocated to local government adequate to meet its mandates? And then are new own revenue sources required? For the allocation between municipalities, the horizontal allocation, is a more efficient model needed to estimate the free basic services subsidy? And if so, what should such a model look like? On the second level questions, we ask, so what is the appropriate level of operating and capital expenditure that local government must incur to meet their mandates? How can these be made more efficient? What own revenues can local government reasonably raise? And then lastly, multiple detailed questions in the terms of reference that will be answered to inform the questions to the key and second level questions. So this slide references, let me say, the milestones that need to be delivered on a timeline to indicate that the inception report was required to be done by the end of September, so towards the end of last year. We are presently working towards an expenditure analysis report to be finalized by the end of this financial year. But of importance, Chair, is that the final synthesis report or a close-out report for the study needs to be done by the end of November 2026. As I conclude, we want to recommend to the committee that to note the contents of the presentation on the review of the white paper, notes that the first draft reviewed white paper has been completed and will be used as a basis for further consultation during February and March. To note the SALGA DCOG study findings and recommendations on the review of the funding model for local government. This body of work has been shared with the National Treasury to inform the local government fiscal review that they are undertaking, and to the last bullet point, recommending that the committee notes the study undertaken by the Treasury. Honorable Chairperson, that is the end of our presentation. I want to stop here, maybe hand to my DG to make any comments through you, Honorable Chairperson, where after the discussion could be guided by yourself. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Naidu. DG, you can come in. DG Changa.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and thank you to Dr. Naidu for the presentation. Dr. Naidu has covered us adequately, Chair, but I thought it's important to state the point that one, National Treasury apologized formally, and they have written to us to say they will not be able to make it to the meeting. There is a letter from the DG of National Treasury. And I'm starting there, Chair, because I know that they have views on the local government funding review. The report that Dr. Naidu is presenting to the meeting is work that was done by SALGA and CoGTA. And there is some work that Treasury is busy with right now. It's not necessarily going to affect the chapter on local government finance in the white paper, because we're dealing with policy proposals. I think what Treasury is focusing on is more of an operating model for financing local government. So it will not be in conflict with the work that we're doing in the white paper on local government. Dr. Naidu has adequately covered us, and perhaps The people who may be asked to add are the colleagues from SALGA, because the last part of the presentation was packaged jointly with SALGA. Chairperson, on my side, I am covered. I'll hand back to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, DG. Colleagues from SALGA, any additions?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning to the members of the committee. Chair, I think we are adequately covered. We were well represented, and as well as what were the findings of our study. So there's nothing really much to add, as to say that we are part of the process of both the white paper as well as the review of the fiscal framework from National Treasury. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Salga. We wanted to hear the voice of Mbogoto, so at least you have covered us. Colleagues, the ball is now on your hands to engage this report, which is detailed, which outlines the processes that are going to unfold and how the last approval will be achieved. Can we then note hands? We have put this item only so that when we reach at 1 o'clock, we'll have covered all members adequately. Let's take hands. The first member will be Dr. Skir Kocher, Honorable Nzimande, Honorable Teza, Honorable Mabibo, Honorable Chief Whip Mumank, Honorable Peter. In that order, colleagues, then we'll take other hands as they come. Can we take the first speaker? Honorable
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you, Dr. Naidoo, for the presentation. I just want to first, before I start, just if that draft, when that draft is readily available, because you said you're starting with stakeholders, if we can be sent to the committee so that we can also work through that going forth. All right. Thank you very much, Chairperson. So my first question, it goes to the proposed increase of the grants or the national transfer. So how will the revised white paper ensure that these increased national transfer and adjusted grants do not simply just perpetuate into the culture of the mismanagement in municipalities? And does it incorporate ring fencing? Dr. Naidoo mentioned about like getting from the fuel tax that goes specifically to roads, or will this also incorporate performance-based funding or other accountability measures, so to guarantee that these new funds that are invested in infrastructure and service delivery, because otherwise we can't be throwing more money to a problem and then it doesn't solve. So I just want to find out about that. Then we go into the professionalization of our administration. So how does the white paper intend to dismantle the entrenched cadre deployment practices and the politicized appointments that underpins municipal collapse? And will there be any introduction of legal reforms and merit-based recruitment processes to just ensure that we professionalize local government? And I also noted, Chair, in Chapter 4, there is no mention of lifestyle audits. I just want to find out what was the inputs, because I do not think that would be not mentioned when there were the interactions. Then when we look at our coalition, and Chair, we all know in the GNU that is the life that we will be facing after the local government elections. So what specific mechanisms does the white paper produce to stabilize coalition governments? Because we have these one-party kingmakers that can destabilize a municipality. If you just look at Nelson Mandela Bay, how many mayors and city managers they have. So how do these proposals compared with Or is there any incorporation of electoral thresholds or the limits of specifically no confidence motions? Then my second last question, I noticed also in the presentation, Chair, they said there's the top 15 municipalities. So I just want to find out when they were looking at that, because and I hear that the environment of local government has changed, where it said that they will be able to raise 90% of their revenue. But if you look at the top 50 municipalities, they still do that. So did they do a study what is common from these municipalities and what can be used? So also, when they are going to revise the government official framework, how will the white paper balance the need for the increased transfers, about the structural favors which comes from governance and capacity problems, rather than just funding alone? Will the framework differentiate based on municipal capacity, and tied to additional funds to government reforms and civil reforms? And then my last question, Chairperson, and I think it might be a repeat, but what enforcement mechanisms does the white paper propose to prevent municipalities from adopting unfunded budgets, which will or improve revenue collection and hold officials accountable for financial mismanagement? Because I think that's one of our biggest problems. In the presentation, it said it cannot be solely a managerial problem, but also structural. But so the consequence management and the professionalization, ring fencing of funds, and I think, Chairperson. Oh, I just wanted to have a last comment that I just remember now, then I will close. It said in chapter 2, there was 2 proposals. One said that I had a 1-tier structure, and then the next one keep with the 2-tier. If I'm correct, does it mean that one of the options means that we take out district municipalities? Can we have a bit more elaboration on that? Because we know sometimes district municipalities is just another form of jobs for cadres, and local municipalities can do better without that. And with that, I am done. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Nzimande.
No, thanks, Chair, and good morning again. Mine will just be in relation to the intent of the intervention that is to be made by the white paper. But I've had nothing, or I have missed, probably, as they were making a presentation. Probably I might have missed the interventions that they intend to introduce in relation to 2 fundamental issues on the design and the funding model. Let me talk on the design. I will expect that obviously they assist and sharply indicate in a summary form what will be the policy shift on the design in relation to fundamental principles like scalability, their coordination and alignment in particular. That's one aspect that I think I should be assisted to hear from this presentation. I've heard much about the problems, which are known problems, that necessitated an intervention, but no intervention in terms of policy shift that to be suggested unless I miss something. That's one. But the second aspect is really on the funding model. I haven't heard probably the submission or a presentation talking to the policy shift in terms of the funding model. Yes, they have said in depth what are the structural and systematic challenges in terms of the funding model, but not necessarily have I heard them speaking on the intervention that will be brought by the policy shift. But what I've heard, it's what, amongst others, the issue that has nothing to do with the policy shift, the issue of non-revenue water as the intervention that also must be considered. And I think they will agree that has nothing to do with the funding model, but it has to do definitely with the lack of investment on the infrastructural issues of water. The last part, how do they intend to strike the balance? Because the politicians are voted into government based on their manifestos to further the interest of the citizenry, meaning they are the ones that are accountable at the end of the day for failures in terms of service delivery. How then do they strike a balance between this notion of professionalization and depoliticizing vis-a-vis a responsibility entrusted on the shoulders of the politicians to account if they were to be de-aligned in terms of what ought to be done in terms of service delivery? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Nzimande. Bengithi uzobuza ukuthi le yamadramu izokwenzakala in the local government esiyakuyona kodwa kasiyeke Mzala. Let's then take responses. Let's take responses on the questions that have been asked by the honorable two members. Thank you.
Maybe if I can go, DG.
Yeah, DG will sum up. We can start.
Yes,
Dr.
please,
Knight.
Dr. Knight.
Okay. Thank you very much, DG. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable Skierhotel and Nzimande, Honorable Nzimande, for the questions. Let me start with the cadre deployment professionalization question because it was raised by both the honorable members. When one has regard to the interventions that we had made through the Local Government Municipal Systems Amendment Act, you would recall that in the first instance, we had made it unlawful for senior managers to hold executive position in political parties and to also occupy a senior management position in municipalities. That was subsequently extended to all employees in municipalities to not hold to be a municipal employee, but also to hold executive position in political parties. Now, that was a direct intervention emanating from a state of local government study that we had undertaken in 2008, 2009, which recommended that we put into law, which we did. But you would recall that the second aspect where that limitation was extended to all employees was found unconstitutional. And that which remains is that senior managers may not hold those two offices, being a senior manager and occupying executive position in political parties. So perhaps to say that was our first intervention to deal with professionalizing municipal administration. Honorable Skierhotel raises the issue of lifestyle audits. It may not have been expressly mentioned in the presentation, but work has already commenced with the DPSA, ourselves, and SALGA to see how we would want to extend lifestyle audits to local government as well. So that is work in progress. So the mismanagement of funds, the ring fencing of grants or funds that go to municipalities, and perhaps may also link to the question raised by Honorable Nzimanda on interventions to address the design on the funding model. Perhaps in response to that, to say that in the first leg, SALGA, the department, had commissioned this work, recommendations that come out and presented now to National Treasury. But the second leg is that work which has commenced already by National Treasury and which work needs to be delivered, as I've indicated in the presentation, by the end of November this year. I suppose it would be premature at this stage, Honorable Chairperson, to indicate what would come out of that study, the review of the local government fiscal framework. But of course, that work which has been done already would be used to inform that which would come out eventually. I guess to note that we have 1920 grants that go to local government. Perhaps a recommendation could be that there could be consolidation, or there could be referring some of the grants to other institutions for better management, better allocation, to deal with these kinds of things more expediently. So to close that, to say that, that work which is being done in relation to the review of the local government fiscal framework, the funding model, is something that we would anticipate as recommendations coming out towards the end of the year. So also Honorable Skier Hochel says that, or asked the question, will the framework be differentiating? And I suppose Honorable Skier Hochel, to wait in anticipation as to what would come out of that review. Around coalitions, I think one must be mindful of the constitutional framework in which we also operate within. When you have regard to Section 1 of the Constitution, which indicates that every adult citizen has universal suffrage, meaning that if you're an adult, you can stand for an election, and if elected, hold public office. While one would want to professionalize the political office, one must be very wary and noteworthy of those constitutional provisions relating to standing for office and being elected. You may not limit that right. If you do, you could be found on the other side of the Constitution. The issue then also lends itself, Honorable Skier Hochel, around the matter relating to kingmakers and the introduction of thresholds. So that which we would want to introduce must be constitutionally compliant. While there may be views that smaller parties eat at executive office, one must be wary of the constitutional framework that guides us in this regard. The enforcement, or to do away with unfunded budgets, this matter is a matter that is being dealt with collaboratively, SALGA, the department, as well as with National Treasury. This has become something on top of the agenda of the department, of the three institutions that I've made mention of, and we would want to see how we have a plan in place, an implementable plan that ensures that municipalities going forward would not adopt unfunded budgets. We would want to see how disciplinary boards in municipalities are operationalized or brought into the fray to ensure that these adoptions of unfunded budgets are appropriately dealt with at an official level, but also at the council level. Perhaps the last response that Honorable Skier Hochel made around Chapter 2 and the 1-tier versus the 2-tier, to say that, this is still proposals draft in the revised white paper that we have out and would be subject to further discussion, debate. And of course, if it is one tier, you rightly say, it will have implications for the form and structure of a district municipality. And if there are changes, it would need to be addressed appropriately through perhaps even constitutional amendment, if indeed accepted by the powers that be. DG, I'm going to stop there. I'm not sure if I've left anything out, but let me hand back to you to make any further remarks. Through you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Dr. Naidu. You've covered quite a number of questions. The question about consequence management, I think it's an important question, but it's also linked to professionalization as well. The thing about professionalization of local government is that it talks to both the officials and the councillors in the municipal council. Now, there has to be a code of practice that both the councillors and the administrators must adhere to manage the council. Yes, it is important that the people who will be held accountable if things are not happening in the council is the political leadership in the council. That's correct. And that is why we're not regulating that part, and there's no proposal in the paper. And please bear in mind that this is still a draft white paper. We still have to gazette it for public comments, and it still has to go to cabinet as well. But what we're trying to do as part of holding leaders and administrators in the council accountable is to make sure that we introduce this professionalization so that we protect the institution and we protect the individuals as well who are running the institution. This works both ways. It's intended to protect this public institution called municipal council, but at the same time, it also is intended to make sure that those who are entrusted to run the council, both that in the administration and also in the council, they do meet a minimum requirement in terms of what is expected of them. Now, we are of the view on the design side, Treasury has made this point consistently, that if you simply increase the budget of local government without dealing with the inefficiencies, you are likely to be financing the inefficiencies. And I think that is the point that Dr. Skio-Kongel is making. That it's not just about increasing the budget of local government, it's about dealing with all of these parts in local government finance. You can deal with the inefficiencies, but it doesn't mean that local government will be adequately financed. There are inefficiencies, but you have to deal with them. But you also need to ask the question, what are the buoyant revenue instruments that you want local government to use to raise revenue? Buoyant in the sense that they are progressive, and these are instruments that are owned by local government themselves. They are not managed elsewhere by provincial or national government. They are buoyant in the sense that they are progressive in the sense that if one good example to demonstrate this is the property rates or property tax, which is a wealth tax. This is their own revenue instrument that is buoyant in local government. It is a wealth tax. It taxes those who have wealth without killing the golden goose, the golden eggs, or the golden geese that lays the golden eggs. So we're trying to solve the entire problem of revenue instruments, expenditure powers, inefficiencies. There is no one instrument that is going to sort out the problem of financing local government. So you have to deal with all of these items, these areas. And the study that CoGTA and SALGA have done, it does demonstrate this. It says there are inefficiencies, and we can put a figure on it. We can play around with figures. But if you simply solve the inefficiencies only, you're not going to solve the entire problem. But also, if you simply increase the revenue, the grant, without dealing with the inefficiencies, you're not going to solve the problem. But also, even if you raise the revenue instruments, you give them buoyant revenue instruments without sorting out inefficiencies, you're still going to be faced with the same problem. You will recall that district municipalities in the past used to have what was called the Regional Services Council levies. It was discontinued in early 2000 for a number of reasons. One of them is that it was deemed unconstitutional. Then the second reason is that it was also seen as double taxation because part of it was business tax. And so many businesses saw it as double taxation, even though there was a payroll component in it. Now, you could argue that it has not been replaced adequately or properly. You replace it with a grant. In the metros, they do get, it was replaced with the fuel levy. Outside the metros, it was replaced with the grant. Now, the discussion is still there as to how best to replace the RSC levies, because it was a significant source of revenue for district municipalities, and it was used to finance the rural roads, to finance some of the municipal roads, district municipal roads. And as you know, in this country, we have close to 50% of the road network. We have 850,000 kilometers of road network in this country. About 50% of that is unpaved road. And that unpaved road network is in municipalities, district municipalities and provinces. So the RSC levy was used to finance this. And we think that this is another area that would require us to look for a buoyant revenue instrument that can be used to finance municipal roads, rural roads, and other related rural infrastructure. So that work is still continuing, and I really don't think that we are done with it. Treasury is working on a model, but the team that is working on the chapter on municipal finance has put forward a number of policy proposals and policy instruments. When we talk about inefficiencies, and I think an example was made about non-revenue water, the non-revenue water is a clear indicator of whether you are managing your water utilities very well or not. You take eThekwini non-revenue water is sitting at 53. They have dropped it. It was 57%, which is significant by any standard. Now it's sitting at 53, so the graph is going in the right direction. You want to drop it all the way up to 25%, because that 53% non-revenue water is a significant amount of money that you have paid for, the water that you have paid for, that is going down the drain. So you have to deal with that in order to increase your revenue. The same applies on non-revenue electricity or technical losses. You have to pay attention to those things, because that's what will assist you to run the utilities in a very efficient way. So there is no monocausal explanation on this matter of managing municipal finances. There's going to be a number of instruments that we need to introduce and deal with them on the revenue side and also on the expenditure side. That's basically the storyline that Dr. Naidu is narrating, that there are various instruments that we need to introduce to fix the problem of funding in local government. Inefficiencies, we must deal with them. The revenue instruments, we must propose what are the revenue instruments that we are proposing. The expenditure side of things, how we manage powers and functions, because the powers and functions, especially on water and sanitation that were done around 2003, we made some assumptions there, and I think those assumptions don't hold water anymore. So there are changes that we need to make. So there will be a number of interventions that we need to make, but we need to introduce them first in the policy. As you know, the white paper is the foundation of local government. Once you agree on the policy proposals, then we will have to express those policy proposals in the legislation. In other words, this will lead to amending certain pieces of legislation so that those policy proposals can be implemented. Some can be implemented before 2031. In the paper, we do talk about the timelines. What are those policy proposals that can be implemented before 2030, and what are the policy proposals that will need to be implemented after 2030? And what are the policy proposals that we're introducing that may need constitutional amendment? Because some policy proposals that are being introduced may need constitutional amendment. Chair, I'll stop there. I don't know if my colleague, Ms. Pasha from Salga wants to add as well. Through you, Chair. Back to you.
Thanks, DG. Salga, any additions?
Okay, we don't have any additions from our side, but I think there was just one question on the top 40, top 15 top performers. I think what it was raised by Honorable Member. It was, when we did the study, it was just for us to see when a municipality, what would be the ideal municipality in terms of efficient expenditures and efficient service delivery. So that top 15 was mainly the municipalities that were performing in line with the norms and standards that are set by the different sectors for trading services. So it was mainly driven from that data, and to say if they are running their services efficiently, that they would adequately be spending on the provision of those services. So that is just my input on that one. But I'm adequately covered by my two colleagues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Pasha. Let me suggest that we do it this way. When we respond, we'll allow Dr. Knight to come, Ms. Pasha, then DG. Then at last, when the DM comes back, he will sum up on behalf of the delegation. So let's continue and take members. Honorable Keza. Honorable Keza, are you still there?
I'm here, Chairperson. I was just fixing my gadget here. Thank you very much to the department. Greetings to colleagues and yourself, Chair. I think the first thing that we must begin to probe or ask from the department is that in the design phase, where we are right now, how is the participation in terms of the stakeholder engagement, and what are those issues that were raised there, so that it doesn't escape us in the committee what the people are saying in terms of the civil society participation, the community's participation, which communities are participating, because we can't have a situation yet again where we are missing the participation in regards to the change of or the review of the white paper on local government, let alone and this will assist us in terms of taking that particular participation throughout to the resource mobilization stage into the implementation stage. And if we leave the people throughout this development, we might find them disowning this process, and that will be undesirable for us. Because I've had 200 submissions, 200 plus submissions that were said to have been thinking, and Dr. Skierkocher is saying that we must receive those and engage on them, and for us it's just to say in the design resource mobilization strategy implementation stage, we must take the people in full confidence. And how we're going to do that, maybe the chairperson can go to media houses and try and take the people within this process, so that by the implementation stages, our people know what was wrong. Because why we are here, Chair, is because of the division of revenue formulae, which is divide by 5, multiply by 5, and end up with municipalities that have a 9%, which is the same thing which we have been orientated on our engagement on the training. And that situation, our people have to appreciate it, or at least have some inclination of what is this process all about. That being said, Chair, I would like to then ask the department in terms of the white paper on local government that envisages the developmental local government that is capable of driving spatial transformation first, second, economic inclusion, and sustainable service delivery. Can the department explain why this review does not begin to admit that the core assumption of 998, namely functional administrative capacity, viable own revenue basis, declining unemployment, and effective intergovernmental oversight have materially failed in the large parts of the rural communities and municipalities? Will the review confront the structural crisis of municipalities that are technically insolvent and dependent almost entirely on these transfers that will be increased? Because I read that there is a proposal to increase from 10% into 17+%, particularly as it relates to rural municipalities. And then there is a question of Section 155 that I fondly want to ask the department whether it will then disrupt that categorization, Chair. Because in our oversights, when you go to Emakazeni local municipality, which is a category C municipality, which has a problem of your Section 79, 78 non-existent committees as a result of skills migrating to the district municipalities, which means that even people that come there, they will end up going to a district because of the salary scale of that municipality, and therefore promptly raise a question about the salary scale of that municipality and the attraction of those skills. Will it fundamentally reconfigure the fiscal framework to prioritize infrastructure maintenance, local industrialization, and state-led capacity building rather than waiting for outsourcing? For each and everything, even the windows of the municipality have to be outsourced, or wait for all the windows to dilapidate or to be broken so that we can secure a tender in terms of the standards and the requirements. How will the revised white paper address the issue of I think that issue was raised of the indigent population beyond what the current equitable share formula can sustainably support? And will the review introduce enforceable consequence management, which has been raised, and municipal managers and political executive who preside over repeated audit failures at section 32 of the MFMA to strengthen it and to ensure that there is accountability and not diving in terms of the capture of the impacts as it is. The Auditor General, Chair, as findings consistently show that tender fraud, irregular expenditure, supply chain manipulation, and political interference remain systemic, particularly in infrastructure projects that collapse midway, including the rural, the municipalities where we conducted like the municipality in Northwest, that we went to. How will the proposed integrity by design, public performance contracts, and separation of councillors from supply chain management materially preempt political influence and patronage networks, rather than merely repackage existing compliance framework that have already failed? What binding legislative amendments will be introduced to criminalize political interference in procurement and enforce personal liability for councillors at the code of conduct of councillors in terms of double dipping and municipal managers who manipulate tenders? How will the proposed single data-driven early warning and enforcement system operate independently on political office bearers to prevent elite capture at a municipal level? My last question, Chair, pertains to the in-house capacity, professionalization, and completion of projects. Now, the white paper, Chair, on emphasizing professionalization of senior leadership and system-wide capacity pathways. Yet rural municipalities continue to rely excessively on consultants, while projects remain incomplete due to poor contract management and lack of in-house technical oversight. How will the review ensure a systematic rebuilding of in-house engineering artisans and general worker capacity instead of perpetuating outsourcing and consultancy dependency? Will the national government ensure that there is funding dedicated specifically for permanent municipal technical posts in rural municipalities, including apprenticeship and artisan development programs? What transitional measures will be implemented to audit, rescue, and complete currently stalled infrastructure projects and holding your persons that are reliable to account? The last one, very last, Chair, that given that the current local government equitable share formula derives from 1996 constitutional framework and operationalized through the division of revenue, is premised on assumptions of municipal own revenue capacity, cross-subsidization, declining poverty, and functional institutional capacity, all of which have demonstrably collapsed under conditions of mass unemployment and spatial inequalities. Can the department clearly outline how this review will fundamentally disrupt, not merely recalibrate the existing formula by revising the review adjustment factor that overestimates fiscal capacity in rural and former homeland municipality, replacing outdated poverty proxies with dynamic unemployment and indigent data, to strengthen the 5-year plans of municipalities, that is the IDPs, so that they align with the principles of the independent developmental frameworks, which says that they should, on annual basis, again, Chair, as I conclude, ensure participation and taking the people with, in terms of the priorities of its municipalities across the country, across provinces, to ensure that they are in sync in terms of those reviews and taking people with at all material times into the implementation stages, right? And last, how will we make sure that there is rural job guarantees? Rural job guarantees in South Africa to enable them to participate in the rural economy so that they are able to pay revenue of municipalities. Because in doing so, apart from the wealth tax, you need a household, a much more household, and the removal of the indigent list slowly into participation as a result of local industrialization. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Tsaiza. Honorable Chief Whip, Honorable Imam.
Person for the opportunity giving to me after a long speech by Honorable Tsaiza. The first point, Chair, is to appreciate the presentation as led by both the remarks that were made by DM and also the DG and the team for keeping the select committee informed. And I think, Chairperson, presentation indeed gives us a sense in terms of the evolution that the local government has gone through since 1998. I think we all know that it has gone through various phases, various interventions, from project consolidate to 5-year strategic agenda to 10 points plan. And therefore, this review is informed by the lived experience that this baby has gone through since the 5th of December 2000. And we need to appreciate progress made in terms of democratizing and transforming the system of local government and its shortfalls. Chair, the first question that I want to pose relates to the, I'll only have two areas that I want to canvass. The first one is the system design and differentiation, which is important because throughout the existence of local government, there's always been an issue raised around municipalities that are not viable, and therefore there would have been various proposals and interventions made in relation to either amalgamating or merging or disestablishing some of the municipalities, because a study would have been done to say this municipality is not viable. So the first question that I want to ask related to that, Chair, is the objective criteria that will be used. What are the objective criteria that will be used to categorize municipalities under the proposed differentiated system, and how disputes emanating from those will be addressed? The first one relates to how will the differentiation avoid deepening inequality between well-resourced municipalities and weaker rural municipalities. Then how are we going to ensure that there are safeguard mechanism built in the process to avoid decisions that could be politically motivated to inform or motivate the reclassification? Then the last one on the intergovernmental relations, relates to the how the proposed National Local Government Policy Coordination Center differ from the existing IGR structures to avoid duplication. What will be the enforced powers in an event some of the sector departments fail to comply with the binding cooperative governance protocols? And then the last one, how will the intergovernmental disputes be resolved more effectively than under the current IGR framework? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Chief Whip. We'll request the team led by DG to respond. But let me check. Honorable Mabibo, are you still there? I saw you have dropped your hand.
Yes, I'm still here, Honorable Chairperson.
Okay. Now I'll take you with Honorable Peter after the responses. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Over to you, DG and the team.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I'm going to ask again Dr. Naidu to come in, and Salga or Ms. Pasha can also come in after Dr. Naidu. Doc, please take it away.
Thank you very much, DG. Thank you very much to Honorable Xesa and Honorable Moimang for the questions. So the issue of system design was raised by both the honorable members, but maybe to respond to the specific issues raised by Honorable Klesa around, so what are the issues? Have we consulted adequately? I want to go back to that slide that I presented on, and I call it the work. And when you look at the various milestones that we had plotted, many of them refer directly to stakeholder consultation and engagement. So although the genesis of the review of the white paper has its roots around July to September of 2024, when we had conceived it, we immediately put in place governance structures, but in that last quarter of that calendar year, we had begun our first stakeholder consultation and engagement. But we went further than that. In the first quarter of the following financial year, between January and March of 2025, we had undertaken political leadership engagements, which then resulted in us publishing on the 10th of April the draft discussion document for public comment, and went to the extent of even extending the deadline for the submission of comments by the public at large. So Honorable Teresa does correctly indicate the sum of around 200. In fact, we had received 266 submissions across from a spectrum of stakeholders. And when I have to look at the numbers, most of them had come from members of the public. So 101 of the 266 submissions that we had received had come from members of the public. But looking at the other 165, it was national, provincial government departments, municipalities, Chapter 9 institutions, professional bodies. We received submissions from academia, research institutions, organized labor, NGOs, consultants, political parties, partner institutions, as well as from business. Now, more than that, we are going to be doing another round of gazetting for public consultation to see how those comments that we've received, which has resulted in this revised draft white paper, is further subjected to public consultation. We will, in the next week or weeks, have a focused discussion with youth, women, and persons with disabilities, but also with political parties to see that which we have put together in terms of the report, revised draft white paper, is subjected to further consultation. And perhaps, Honorable Chairperson, the various issues that has been raised by Honorable Teresa would be issues that would also be subjected to further discussion, engagement, as we have also itemized it as the Honorable Member was making the input. So the specific issues around non-functional Section 79 committees is something that, as the department, we have a quarterly forum where we interact with provinces, National Treasury, SALGA, to see how best we get feedback, reports on functionality of Section 79 and Section 79A committees through provinces. So it is something that, we are monitoring to look at functionality as well as other issues coming out of the committees. The matters relating to remuneration, movement of persons from locals to districts, I suppose it is something that is naturally organic in that persons that see better opportunities would migrate towards that. But we must understand also that the formula used to determine the grading and remuneration of municipalities are scientific in nature, based on the income that the municipality collects, on the equitable share that it receives, but also on the population. And I suppose if you want to get to a higher grade, own revenue collection also would become a factor. The more you collect, the more then you would migrate to a higher graded municipality. Interference in the administration is specifically provided for in item 12 of the Code of Conduct for Councillors. And it says that a councillor may not interfere in the management of the administration, give or purport to give instructions, obstruct or attempt to obstruct the implementation of any decision, and encourage or participate in any conduct which could cause or contribute to maladministration. But more than that, in 2021, one would recall that in the amendments that we introduced in the Structures Act, we provided that if a councillor breaches the code of conduct, meaning if a councillor engages in this type of interference that I have mentioned, to be a breach of the code of conduct and could result in the removal of that councillor from office and therefore also subjecting him or her to not hold office for a period of 2 years. I suppose the implementation of that specific clause, and maybe other clauses as well, is not being implemented in the manner in which we saw it being implemented and rolled out. Suppose the early warning system that's been made mention of, it is the golden thread that you would see going throughout the chapters, the 10 chapters that we have put out in the draft document. But we must also be mindful of other provisions in other pieces of legislation that we have. For example, we have in the IMSI bill, in the Intergovernmental Monitoring Support and Interventions bill, an early warning system that we are proposing in there, aligned to the Office of Standards and Compliance that we have in the Public Administration Management Act. And we say that that early warning system must give warnings to municipalities, to provinces, as well as to national government sector departments as to where municipalities are found wanting and to intervene timeously. The last point, Honourable Chairperson, in relation to Honourable Thesa suggesting that we need to be disruptive in the local government equitable share formula. So you'd recall from the presentation that I've made that when it comes to the horizontal division of revenue in municipalities, it is more or less there according to the study, but may want to be further enhanced in terms of some components of the formula. The big problem is the vertical division, that which comes from national and goes to municipalities. And of course, there is a number that is a percentage that is mooted. But I also said in the same breath that we have a fixed fiscal envelope, meaning that the cake is that big, and if the chunk is going to be increased for local government, it needs to come from somewhere else. So bearing all of these components within the bigger scheme of the fiscal review, Honourable Chairperson, we need to be mindful of that as we navigate these waters towards arriving at a reviewed local government fiscal framework. In relation to the matters raised by Honourable Muiman, and I suppose the first issue was around system design, differentiation, but also amalgamation and what criteria one would look at when it comes to a differentiated model of local governments. Of course, one of the underpinning factors relating to that could be your Schedules 4 and 5, the 38 powers and functions that we have there. We would want to see how capacity and capability exists in local government when it comes to the differentiation model. but also being mindful of the constitutional imperatives that one needs to be mindful of, and also take into account as one arrives at a preferred option of 1-tier, 2-tier, etc. The last point, Honorable Chair, is in relation to IGR disputes. And I suppose the tool that we would want to look at would be the provisions that we have in the Intergovernmental Relations Framework Act, the mechanisms provided therein, and to see how we activate that. I believe that it is a piece of legislation that we haven't really taken implementation very, very strongly, but those provisions that we find in the Intergovernmental Relations Framework Act would be, in my view, the tools and mechanisms one would use when it comes to IGR disputes. I'll stop there and over to Lerato to fill in any gaps. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have much to add, but I think when coming to, we'll need to look into the mechanisms of how do we come up with an indigenous framework that aligns with the funding of the equitable share formula, because currently today there are challenges in terms of municipality indigenous registers vis-a-vis the numbers that are provided for the equitable in the equitable share formula, so that the approach looks into, or the mechanisms that will have to come out of the review of the fiscal framework and the relevant legislative frameworks that will need to be amended after the white paper. Because currently there is that challenge. Municipalities unable to meet the numbers that are there in the formula. The stats data is usually outdated. Municipalities spend more money in terms of verifying the targeted beneficiaries of that equitable share or that benefit. So I think that is one of the issues that will come out of these reviews, so that we find alignment between what the three basic frameworks is saying, the indigenous policy framework is saying, and as well as the policies of municipalities, and in alignment with the equitable share formula. Okay, I think that's the part that I wanted to just add on in terms of the indigenous question that was raised in terms of what would come out of ensuring that we need to make sure that all the beneficiaries receive the benefits that government allocates to them, and municipalities need to have credible and accurate indigenous registers as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't know if there's anyone else who wants to add. If none, Chair, I guess the problem that we are grappling with is a structural problem, the structure of local government as a whole. You will recall that before 2000, first we had 1,500 plus transitional local authorities. There were many of them. They were small, probably manageable, maybe not manageable to the national bureaucrats, but at a local level, the truth is that local government and municipal governance is about access to that governance by communities. Now, we moved and rationalized first to 849 and then to 284 in 2000. And now some of the structures that we have created are very vast. Some of the wards are huge. and extremely difficult for some of the councillors to service them. If you are a councillor in the Northern Cape, you travel the whole day in a ward. You look at a municipality like Kopanong, which is very vast in the Free State, I think south of the Free State. If you are a councillor in that very vast municipality as well, servicing your ward is a tall order. This is what we want to get. We are trying to solicit, even in the discussion document, if you remember, the discussion document that we published in March and then extended the deadline up to July. The intention was to provoke questions about things that are affecting communities, and we got what we were looking for. A lot of questions were raised about the structure of local government, about the financing of local government, and the whole question about whether we should keep municipalities that do not have their own revenue. Remember, the finance or revenue is not the only determinant of whether you should have local government or not. You look at the Ugandan system. In Uganda, they have a 5-tier system of local government. They have the county, they have the parish, they have the district, they have the sub-county, they have the village. So they have a 5-tier system of local government. We're grappling with 2-tier system of local government, which is district and municipal, local municipal government. So we have to deal with all of these things about the structures, but first it must be in the policy, because if you state what you want in the policy, then we will deal with it in the Structures Act amendment. Dr. Naidu is probably going to talk to what we call the General Laws Amendment Bill, which will then give effect to the policies that you are likely to introduce in the white paper. So what is being raised here and the comments that are being made here are very relevant, even in the developed world, in the US, in the UK, in the Netherlands, in Germany. You have municipalities that don't have adequate own revenue, that still rely entirely on the national fiscus or the state transfers in countries where you have a federal system. So it's not only unique to South Africa that you will have municipalities that do not have a good revenue base, but it doesn't mean that things will stay like that forever. If OR Tambo and its local municipality does not have a vibrant revenue base, it doesn't mean that things are going to stay the same and things are going to be like that. What we also need to bear in mind is that all of these things are happening at a time when the economy of the country is not performing well. The national fiscus is extremely under pressure because the economy has not been growing for a very long time. The same could be said about local economies, municipal economies. The ratepayers' disposable income is extremely under pressure because people are unemployed. So you see high levels of debt at municipal level being serviced by municipalities. You also see high levels of debt at the national level as well. So municipalities are also beginning to mirror the same pressure that the national budget is experiencing, because municipalities as well depend entirely on whether the economy of those municipalities is vibrant or not. So if the economy of the country is not performing, it does affect the economy of municipalities as well, vice versa. If we don't fix the economies of municipalities, the economy of the country is also going to be affected because the two are influencing each other. So all we need to do, that is why in the white paper, you probably have seen it, that there is a chapter dedicated to economic development at a municipal level. In fact, we've collapsed both the spatial development and the economic development into one chapter. I think it's chapter 10, if I'm correct, but Dr. Naidu can correct me. So this gives us an opportunity to design the type of local government that we want in the future. We may not be able to implement all those policy objectives in the next 3 to 5 years, but we will still have municipalities that will not be in a position to raise its own revenue, and that will depend on the national fiscus. Just like you have a similar arrangement in the multi-tiered local government system in Uganda. And also you have a similar system in the multi-tiered system of local government in the UK. But we need to agree what is it that we want to create as a functional local government. There are good examples. There are pockets of brilliance, even in municipalities that do not have own source of revenue. There are well-managed municipalities in this country with no substantive revenue base in rural areas. We can give you examples of municipalities that are well-managed in Limpopo, in Eastern Cape, in KZN. We do have examples of rural municipalities that consistently have delivered good annual financial statements, achieved audit outcomes, and delivered services to communities in those rural areas. So this is an opportunity after 1998 to look back and say what works, what does not work. If you read the discussion document that we published, we asked this question: what works over the years? What assumptions do we need to interrogate further, given that we now know that certain things work and certain things don't work? What assumptions did we make in 1998? Salga makes a point that assumption that 90% of the revenue of local government will come from own revenue. And Salga says that assumption that we made in the white paper of 1998, that assumption doesn't hold water anymore, especially given the economic performance over the years. So that discussion is still going on between ourselves, Salga, and National Treasury. And there are members of the community who have commented on this as well. And there are roundtable discussions that we have had that talks to all of these issues. And on the issue of professionalization, again, there's a comment, one of the comments that was put forward by one institution, I'm not sure which one, is those we received a long list of comments from various institutions, and we can share that with you as well, the list of the institutions that have commented on this. And they said, they asked one question on this, and they were using example of the old ordinances. I'm not sure whether it's the Cape Ordinance or it's the old Transvaal Ordinance. And they are saying it was extremely difficult to tamper with the contract of a municipal manager at the time. Remember, municipal managers were referred to as town clerks before 1994. They were using the clerical system. And that ordinance says, in order to tamper, to alter, and even suspend the contract of a municipal manager, you need to get concurrency from the provincial DG. It doesn't say minister, it says DG. Because part of professionalizing the work of administrators in the municipality, it means that the municipalities, first, the municipal officials, they need, some of them belong to professional institutions. But also the administration of the contracts of those senior municipal managers in the council, the municipal manager in particular, is delegated to the Director General. Whether that's a good thing or not, this policy must express itself on that matter. Currently, this is delegated to the council. And part of the problem that we have experienced over the years is that it's very easy to get rid of a municipal manager. We've changed municipal managers several times. And we do know that those municipalities that are stable, the majority of municipalities that are stable, are municipalities where the contracts of municipal managers have not been tampered with. It's municipalities, municipal managers who have run the municipality for a very long time, And we have stabilized the administration, because remember, the people who are running the municipality every day is the administrators and not the councillors. Because if you look at the system, it's if you like, it's modeled against your public listed companies, that councillors or the council meet probably maybe 4 times a year or 5 times a year. But people who are running the council with management committees, with supply chain committees, it's the administrators and not the politicians in the council. So therefore, we need to pay attention on the professionalization of the administrators in the council, and also protect them from political interference, and also make sure that they are not themselves politicized, because sometimes you struggle to separate whether this person is an administrator or a politician. It becomes difficult to tell whether this particular individual in the administration is behaving like an administrator or a politician. So that's what we want to achieve through professionalization. I think most of the questions were answered by Dr. Naidu. And if there is any question that we might have missed, Chair, please feel free to bring it to our attention. We want to make sure that we attend to every comment that is made here. But most of the comments are intended to enhance the quality of the work that we are doing here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, DG. We are now going to move and take Honorable Mabibo and Honorable Peter, the last hands.
Thank you, Chairperson. Let me just not switch on my camera because of the network issues. And then let me just greet honorable members on the platform. Greetings to the Deputy Minister, the Director General, and the representative of SALGA on the platform. Let me take this opportunity, as most of my questions have been covered. I want to know which criteria which can be used by the department to minimize the appointments of administrators and consultants in the municipalities. And how will the department assist or come up with the intervention of aging infrastructure? How can the department assist the municipality with revenue collection? Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Peter.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Greetings to the members of the departments. Chair, the deliberation that is on this platform, they have covered a lot. Even I find myself, I'll be unfair to ask questions. But because of the potholes that are on the road, it makes me to ask only a few questions. My question to Honorable Naidu, I just want to know about this white paper, the existence of this white paper. Does it bear fruits for the local municipality as a legal document? Does this white paper still a relevance of existing as the white paper? Why, Chair, I'm asking this question? I'm asking this question, Chair, because white paper exists since 1998. In my mind, I ask myself, Chair, what concrete results were produced by this white paper as a legal document? I'm asking myself, but I transferred that to Honorable Naidu. I'm asking this, Chair, because according to my view, I don't see any progressive results produced by this white paper, rather than the failures of the local municipality. It takes me to ask SALGA, what role is played by SALGA through these failures of its members? Understandable, Chair, that SALGA, its members, they have been taken from the ground level. without training. That is the challenge that SALGA might experience. But Chair, shall the white paper be a progressive if most of the incompetent members are running local municipality? My last question is, as the white paper is a legal document for public comments, does it bear fruits? If yes, what are those fruits? I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Peter. I'll just put my own comments and questions so that the team will conclude and we close the meeting after. All the failures that have been experienced by municipalities, they are as a result of an acknowledgement of the assumption that municipalities on their own will be in a better position to raise revenue. But the other bigger challenge was you've got rural municipalities and small municipalities which are adding more burden to the metros. Hence, the migrations anticipated in big metros is 15% to 25%. So that on its own, it tells you that if you leave a structure like local government underfunded, those are the results you'll get. Now we are happy that the white paper is intended to try and close those gaps, but it's not adequate on the suggestions that have been put before us. Because what informs the percentage to 17%? Are we not going to be meeting after in the next 5 years and say we must also review because 17% is not enough? What should be the overall intervention? I think there are many fundamental questions which do not only affect the sphere of local government, but which raises a question whether is there a need for provinces before local government? Or you can not have legislatures and provincial government, but having directorates working with national government to support local government. So I think those are the broader issues, political issues and policy issues which will have to be entertained in terms of bringing about effective local government. The other issue is how we design our finances. Looking at the contributions that the private sector may want to come in and support local government, but the financial model which incorporates collaborations of both private sector and the public sector, I think we still have a big challenge there. I'll cite a simple example. When somewhere we're faced with the issues of crime in the area called Dinanda, we appealed to the private sector to say, look, the crime does not affect government, it affects you because your employees cannot come healthy in your work environment and be productive when the crime is rife. So therefore, you need to come on board and contribute. There comes the private sector hearing the call from that mayor saying, okay, no, it's fine. They just go and fix our satellite police stations. I can tell you, it took more than 3 years for approval of accepting such a donation to happen. And the private sector it does not work like us. They don't tolerate laziness. They don't tolerate things which are delayed unnecessary. When they take decisions, you meet with them on Friday. on Saturday, they start sending their people to go on the ground to look at those police stations. On Monday, they come back, they say, we have allocated 1.7 million to try and rehabilitate these satellite police stations. But I can tell you, it took more than 3 years for government to accept, to authorize the acceptance of that donation. So it tells you that there's something wrong about us. We are making calls that private sector must come on board, but when they come on board, we delay them and we don't even cooperate with them to accept what they want to donate, because we want them to donate skills. We want them to donate their money to fix challenges of infrastructure, whether it's water and sanitation, electricity, roads, infrastructure. But the way government works is terrible. I can tell you, DG, it's terrible. We as government, we are not serious. We take our own time before we accept a donation from the private sector. So if those things are not fixed, because there is no adequate funding that will be achieved in government, government will never have adequate funding. So therefore, you'll need intervention from the private sector. But the private sector get frustrated when they want to come on board, but it's you who want their help, who delays that process of coming on board. So I think as we are working with National Treasury, there are fundamental gaps there which needs to be fixed. And it's really unacceptable that when people want to donate, they must be delayed for more than 3 years for their donation to be accepted. So there's another area. But the bigger elephant in the room is that if we are not having clear grants which are intended to turn the tide around in the deep rural areas, we are still going to be remaining with challenges of local government, which is not the one that is envisaged. So even nationally, we can ask one question now and say, what is our strategy of rural development? Others think rural development is agriculture. Others may think that rural development is just to come and donate soccer kits. But what is a comprehensive plan of rural development? How do you inject a growth in that rural development, which is not only based on building new malls only, but also in terms of settlement, to ascertain that areas of Amakosi are fully integrated to form part of the development, so that they are not deciding on their small corner somewhere on how they allocate land. And when they allocate such land, it becomes a skewed development, because there will be no room for clinics, no land will be left for schools, no land will be left, it's only houses. So this partial development framework integration and fully integration is urgent, DG. And we cannot address issues of local government if that area has not been addressed fully. And CoGTA nationally should deliberately allocate funding to support municipalities in that exercise, where you bring together Amakosi traditional leaders with municipalities to plan together on the land use management in those municipalities. Conduct land audits. How much land is still remaining? How can it be distributed in such a way that it gives us the human settlement that we envisage, not a skewed development which will affect the lives of people who reside in those areas? So these are pockets of interventions that will also need to be looked at. The other one, there has been a call in many municipalities that municipalities must absorb cleaners, must absorb security, must absorb those who are dealing with other services in the municipalities. But whilst on the other hand, you look at the structure the organogram of the municipality is already fully packed. But here is this requirement. Can't we find another alternative way of delivering services without bloating structures of municipalities or organograms, but making communities themselves to fully participate in rendering services through expanded public works interventions? For instance, there's no need for any municipality at this stage that we should continue to have tenders of waste collection. There's no need for that. Just say to the community, the youth is there, it's unemployed, it's in the areas, put them in the expanded public works program for a period of 2 to 3 years. You exchange the list and you become fair in that process, not be selective. Then you take the same community to clean their own areas. That will reduce the budgets allocated to tenders, but it will also enhance full participation of committee members instead of being the spectators in their own areas. And they look at people who come from outside who come and clean their area and live with profit. So allocation of certain quotas to social enterprises, which will also make a contribution in rendering services of municipalities, instead of relying more on the on this counter PTY LTD, where it's a one-man show. There's no distribution of ownership of wealth in that structure. But we leave social enterprise and cooperatives where everybody who participates there is an owner, is part of ownership of such social structure. So there are many interventions which will require to be also entailed in the plans to change how local government works. Youth service must be elevated. It should not only be something of national, but it should be finding expression at a local government level, where there are things where government can really, and municipalities can really make use of communities to sign social compact with communities to ensure that they become part of their own development, but they are directly contributing in that development rather than being spectators. Somebody come in, do that small road, take profits away from that community. The community only benefits through labor and some subcontractions and so on and so on. But the real development and settlement should incorporate how we transform procurement, because the fundamental challenge is our procurement system. Our procurement system, the determining factor of our procurement system is pricing. So if it's pricing, definitely it should be driven towards a beneficiation of certain groups. It will be a reserve of certain groups, not the entire community. But if procurement is informed by the social issues in the area, the social development that you want to achieve, it's not only driven by the lowest bidder or the highest bidder takes it all and so on and so on. So it will be a transformative procurement. Because if you want to make local government work, we must reduce these tenders. Then the last point, when a call is made for people to be insourced, there may be another alternative way. We should not only be concentrating in one area, that is either you absorb them or you privatize or you outsource in totality. Even outsourcing can become more transformative than what is exactly taking place as we speak. So when I say it can be transformative, just take an example. For eThekwini municipality, I think they are spending up to 1.5 to 2 billion rands for security contracts only per annum. Now, if you say those security personnel must be absorbed by the municipality, the study was conducted, so they will need 4.5 billion if they want to do the insourcing. Now tell me, if you are already running a service for 1.5 to 2 billion, but for you to insource people to be employed by the municipality, you need 4.5 billion. Where are you going to source such funding? So the best thing to do is to have another transformative way of doing it, not only relying on the private sector in totality, but change those people whom you intend insourcing, but don't take them and insource them in the municipality in that way. Insource them differently. Put them into social enterprises. They are the ones who must determine how much they're gonna pay themselves, because they are all owners of their social enterprise, rather than all this counter PTY Ltd security company, which gave them crumbs, but it claims bigger money, but it gives them crumbs, give them 4,000 every month instead of a living wage. So you put them there, you train them, they invoice you directly, you train them in terms of business management, then that on its own is not gonna go to 4.5 billion. It's gonna reduce that 4.5 billion. But if you extend the ownership patterns, of wealth patterns in that sector of security, where everyone, they can now decide how much they're gonna save in this money that they're going to invoice the municipality. They can allocate this money for savings. They can allocate themselves living wage with the benefit, with everything. So you are removing the risk from the municipality. They take their own risk, but the municipality pay lesser than what it has been paid to the private sector. So those are the things that you need to explore. Thinking out of the box, not this thing of saying we only have two options. You whether you insource them through that fully insourcing to the municipality, or you leave them to the policy counter PTY Ltd, who exploits them on daily basis without giving them a living wage. So that is my submission, but we are looking forward to see to it that we bring everything to make local government work, but there's still a lot to be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I then ask Dr. Naidu to go in first? There were questions that were directed to Salga as well. I will ask Lerato to attend to those. With your permission, Chair, can I ask Dr. Naidu to comment?
Granted.
Thank you very much, DG. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, and the honorable members for the questions. Maybe to just respond, Honorable Chair, to the matter that you raised around the 17% and the increase in the quantum of the equitable share. Perhaps to provide a little bit of context as well, you'd recall the slide that I presented on the fiscal gap and the fiscal effort. So while the fiscal gap, the study found to be at around 150 billion rand, a big responsibility would also rely on government, broadly on municipalities specifically, in relation to how that fiscal effort could be dealt with. When you look at that 92 billion rand in the fiscal effort, 47 municipalities, so the 39 intermediate city municipalities and the 8 metros make up just over 70 billion rand of that 98 billion rand, of that 92 billion rand. 58 billion rand that is mooted as the fiscal transfer gap is something that informs the 17% that we have been talking about. Of course, all of this, as I've indicated already, has been shared with the Treasury. We would want to see how it forms part of the considerations that the National Treasury and the team would look at as we finalize the local government fiscal review. Honorable Peter asks the question, does it bear fruit, the white paper? So let's go back to the statement made in the SONA, in that many of the challenges in municipalities arise from the design of our local government system. So, of course, if it is a design problem, we would need to look at the policy. We would need to look at those assumptions that were made back in 1998 and how we fixed that. And therefore, Honorable Chairperson, the need for the review that we are undertaking. And you'd recall that I said that we would want to see how we have a system-wide reset to look at those assumptions made back then, but also looking at the intent. And whatever we do in terms of reformulating, we want it to be a realistic agenda, but also balancing the ambition with short, medium, and long-term interventions and policy shifts. So this is a policy document that we're working on. And as the DG has already made the point, how we program our interventions following this policy intent would be how we would want to reshape and see change in local government. We've been forward-looking, I believe, in the sense that we have not completed, we were not thinking of completing it and then thinking of the consequences thereafter. We have already thought about putting in place this transition management body. And by doing so, we would want to keep the momentum going in terms of doing all of these engagements that we've done, preparing the policy document that we have, and then having this body to take forth those interventions that we would want to see in local governments. I believe, from where I sit, that which we are doing is intended to improve local government. It's going to be an all of government and all of society approach in order to make sure that that which we are proposing actually bears fruit at the end. The last point, and to the honorable member that raised the issue of interventions and the criteria that one would be looking at going into the future. On the 31st of March last year, we had introduced into Parliament the Intergovernmental Monitoring Support and Interventions Bill. And when you have regard to the provisions in the bill, there are very specific value chain in terms of how interventions would be happening in the future. You'd recall that this bill gives effect to sections 100 and 139 of the Constitution. So very specific provisions. It looks at requests being made by provinces in terms of interventions, which would then inform the kinds of support that would be lent to ensure that that intervention is considered appropriately. But the point made around administrators, we found that that has been a challenge in many instances where an intervention takes place. There is interference by municipal officials when the intervention takes place. But what we've put into the bill now is that those officials can be suspended and face consequences. The bill also makes provision for the minister to have a database or a list of experts that the minister could use when it comes to intervening and deploying these resources in those municipalities or province where interventions do take place. I will stop here, Honorable Chairperson, and hand to Lerato from Salga.
Thank you, Chair. I think my one will only come on the issue of what is Salga support. Chair, we've got 6 mandates in which we are supporting municipalities. And I think I'll just speak on the success programs that we have established over the years. On the lobbying and advocacy, I think we have come up with policy proposals such as the review of the fiscal framework, the overhaul of the disaster framework, as well as calling for the review of the white paper, Chair. And I think we are now seeing the results of our lobbying for over the last years, where CoGTA has taken initiative, as well as a National Treasury, to review these fundamental policy frameworks. I think when it comes to support and advisory, Chair, we have various programs. I'll specifically speak on, because we have seen that municipalities, through their local economic development, have not necessarily been focused on how they are contributing to the growth of the country. And we have various programs in terms of a business competitive index that we have produced in terms of helping municipalities to package themselves to attract investment. We've also have a program of helping municipalities to come up with bylaws that are conducive and helping them to do ease of business within municipalities, in terms of what are the backlogs and what are those issues that are really hampering investment to come into municipalities. But we also have a program that helps municipalities in terms of targeting small businesses to become participant of the market, as well as participating in the SEMs of municipalities.
We lost you.
So become businesses that grow and contribute towards the growth of the economic development of municipalities. On the municipal finance side, we've come up with a program, Chair, and this program was spending the grants, and municipalities are developing projects that will attract investment from the private sector. As you would know, Chair, that municipalities were not necessarily supposed to rely on grants, but through their own generated revenues, they would generate margins that will realize reserves that will invest back into the capital expenditures of municipalities, as well as going into the market and raising debt for their capex ambitions. So we've partnered with UCT in terms of project preparation, where we've been running this program for 2 years now, in terms of helping municipalities to come up with projects that are bankable, and what are the issues that they need to look at in terms of project planning as well. So we also have municipal audit support, Chair, where we started off with 3 districts. We are now having 18 municipalities that we had adopted with hands-on support to help them in terms of improving their municipal audit outcomes. And over the 2 years, we were able to assist municipalities to decrease their findings, material findings, by 42 in the 2023-2024. In the 2024-2025, it was 21, and 5 of them were able to improve from one audit outcome to a better audit outcome, Chair. But we also have capacity building programs, in various capacity building programs. As you know, we have a council induction program, Chair. And what we have, when we are evaluating, and what Parliament has raised, and as well as the AG, has been whether we have assessed the impact of the training that we had provided. So in the new strategy of SALGA, we'll be looking into post-training and how do we build those training programs so that they are able to be impactful, and they are able to also realize, help municipalities, especially councillors, in terms of advising them on the decisions. Chair, apologies for the noise that you may be seeing. But the other, Chair, is strategic profiling, because what we are doing currently is getting all municipalities that are performing better, that in various performance indicators, and profiling them and twinning them with other international municipalities that are performing better, and also attracting them in terms of investments, because there are pockets of excellence, Chair. So we do strategic profiling and also use those municipalities in the support programs that we have in terms of sharing best practices, Chair. As part of the issues that we've raised was the unfunded mandates. Now, we are now twinning municipalities that had come out of the unfunded mandates to help municipalities that are already there, because we have seen that it is possible for municipalities to come out of those unfunded mandates, Chair. So I think, Chair, we as SALGA, we have those 6 mandates that we currently, yes, we are not reaching as many municipalities as we'd like, but what we are trying to do now is to partner with the IGR partners as well as external stakeholders in terms of reaching majority of the municipalities, especially for those municipalities that need dedicated hand-holding. We also have programs in terms of the non-revenue water and electricities, where we have partners with the Water Partnership Office as well as the DBSA, because we have seen that majority of the municipalities are now incurring a high number of non-revenue water and electricity, and also leading the JET Council in the PCC in terms of transitioning municipalities into just energy transition, as well as climate change. Chair, I think lastly, we also really significantly trying to help municipalities in terms of climate change, Chair. And part of the program that we'll be doing is how do you institutionalize climate change into IDPs as well as municipalities budgeting for climate change in terms of the infrastructure plans, Chair. So those are some of the various projects that we are embarking on, and we really are strained financially to reach as many municipalities as we can, but through the partnerships that we have, we are able to maximize on our efforts as well as our support to all municipalities. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Naidu and Ms. Pasha. Chair, there were questions about the utilization of consultants. I think there's general consensus across the board that we've gone overboard at municipal level in utilizing consultants. You will recall that the primary functions or core functions of a municipality is to provide those big 5 basic services: water, electricity, roads, you name them. And all of that engineering work in water, in electricity, it needs someone with institutional memory in a municipality. So relying on consultants to perform basic municipal services is a challenge. So we do encourage municipalities to have this type of capacity in-house, just like during the clerical days, you used to have a town planner, town engineer, town clerk. These are people who are working for the municipality. Even if you do use a consultant, it must supplement the work that officials in the municipality are doing. We have to find a way to regulate the utilization of consultants. I think we can introduce that, especially in that chapter on service delivery. I think there is a chapter in the white paper that is dedicated to service delivery. What's going to happen is that once policies are approved and the white paper is approved, it will then inform the amendment of the legislation. So some of the things will be done in the legislation. For instance, if there are clauses or changes that have to be introduced in the Municipal Finance Management Act, we will have to introduce those changes Some of the changes have been introduced in the Public Procurement Act. For instance, a municipality can run a process of a partnership, a PPP, without seeking approval from Treasury, as long as it's below a certain threshold. And if I'm correct, I think that threshold is 2 billion rands. So if there's any partnership that the municipality wants to have and it's below 2 billion, they don't need approval from Treasury, if my memory serves me well, as per the Public Procurement Act. So those are the changes that have been introduced. Again, earlier I talked about Uganda as an example. Some of the municipalities in Uganda are responsible for agriculture. Some are responsible for education. They have a differentiated approach to service delivery. Some municipalities are better placed to deal with education, agriculture, but I think in our case, we adopted this one-size-fits-all approach that these functions belong to province, these functions belong to national, and these functions belong to local. I think we need a differentiated approach as well as a country. I think agriculture is one function that could easily be managed by various municipalities, especially in rural areas. There is invest in rural strategy. Maybe we should come back to you with the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, together with the Department of Traditional Affairs, to discuss that invest rural strategy which you have raised. There is a question about the 1998 white paper. Was it relevant? What are the concrete results that were produced by the white paper of 1998? I think there are concrete examples, practical examples. First, the current legislation and the regulations that are governing local government, they come out of that white paper. Remember, the white paper is the foundation for your policy, for your legislation. So your Systems Act, your Structures Act, all these pieces of legislation, they were formed because of the white paper of 1998. Systems Act, 2000 Structures Act in 1998 as well, immediately after the white paper, because you needed to create the structure of local government that you want. The same applies now. Once we have adopted this 2026 white paper, we have to ask ourselves, what is the nature of the structure of local government that we want, that will achieve the objectives of the policy that we are going to pass. So anything that we're doing now in government, local government, it is because of the 1998 white paper. White paper 1998 is the foundation of local government. So everything that we're doing, good or bad, I said earlier, there are pockets of excellence in local government. So everything, good or bad, is as a result of what we introduced in 1998. The timing is perfect to take a look at that 1998 now and ask what works and what doesn't work. What are the changes that we want to introduce? And I think you're making practical proposals about, limiting the utilization of consultants. You're making examples about how to deal with aging infrastructure. Ms. Pasha has touched on this. The other question about the 17%, remember, even if you increase it, excuse me. We said earlier, sorry, if you increase the revenue and you don't deal with the inefficiencies, you're not going to achieve much. So we're adopting a multi-pronged approach that you may want to increase the transfers, the vertical transfers, but you also need to deal with the inefficiencies. You also need to deal with non-revenue water. So to solve this problem, you just don't need to focus on one item. You need a multi-pronged approach to deal with local government finance. increasing the transfers could be one part, but increasing the transfers without dealing with the inefficiencies may not solve the problem. So you need to do all of these things that are needed to fix local government finance and not just move up to 17%. And this is one area that is highly debated and contested, heated discussion between National Treasury and SALGA and ourselves. In fact, we asked DG Baleni to convene us to spend a little bit of time on this issue of, the fiscal instruments for local government, the transfers, the inefficiencies. So DG Baleni, DG in the Presidency, has agreed that she is going to convene a meeting with SALGA, National Treasury and CoGTA, so that we can spend a little bit of time on this particular topic. There's a proposal on utilizing provinces. One good example of bringing provinces on board in certain areas is this area of environmental health profession. When we were dealing with foodborne illnesses, one of the challenges that we encountered is this area of the scarcity of environmental health practitioners. We have the figures to show to you what is expected, what is the ratio that is expected of environmental health practitioners per municipality, per district. The numbers are scary right now, because these are people who should be inspecting various food outlets, restaurants. But if you look at that number of the EHPs, the environmental health practitioners that we have in the country, it's in municipalities, in particular in district, is very scary. It means we will not be able to service this function. Now, what can we do? In one of the deliberations, Minister Mutsoaledi argues the point that maybe we should not have devolved the function, because what is happening is that municipalities are struggling to hire these professionals and to even pay for them. Maybe we should get the province to be a little bit more involved in matters of environmental health, because environmental health is needed everywhere where we are handling food. Otherwise, we are going to end up with a situation where we mix things and people die like they did under the foodborne illness, which was declared as a national crisis at some point. So we can use other examples. I'm just using EHP, environmental health function, as one example. There are other examples where we have to ask ourselves, amongst the three spheres of government, who is better placed to service a particular function, and adopt a hybrid model, as they do in Kenya, as they do in Uganda, and as they do in some countries in Asia, and also in the UK, that we should not be rigid about the functions. And the Department of Water and Sanitation, DG, makes a proposal, Dr. Sean Phillips, that perhaps what we need to do is to separate the regulatory functions and the provider functions at a municipal level. If municipalities are failing as water service providers, then we have to look at who is best placed to provide a water services function. For instance, the water boards, some of the water boards have done well. Rand Water is one of the oldest water utility in the world, in the top 5 of the best performing utilities in the world. So if municipalities are struggling to manage bulk water in their jurisdiction, maybe we should consider utilizing Rand Water as a water service provider in that particular municipality. And that becomes a public-public partnership, which is allowed the same way you regulate public-private partnerships. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and that chapter on service delivery does flag these issues. It introduces these issues of alternative service delivery methods, so that we don't end up using one approach. You argue that in some cases it would be best for us to utilize communities for security, and you wouldn't pay much And community partnerships are encouraged and they are allowed. And they are easy to contract with. And this as well is introduced in that chapter. Chair, if there are comments that we have not addressed adequately, again, feel free that they get forwarded to us. We can respond to some of them in writing, and we are more than willing to come back as well if there is a need for us to come back and make a presentation. Hopefully, both the minister and the DM will be in the meeting. The minister was in cabinet this morning, and DM had to leave to attend to a meeting with SALGA. But we are of the view that by end of March, we would have done almost 90% of what is expected of us. Thank you very much, and I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, DG and the team and SALGA. Colleagues, I think all the issues raised were covered, but if we feel that we still have outstanding issues, we can submit those issues to Mr. Manele, our coordinator. We'll forward them to the department and request the department to come back and engage us on those issues. But we really appreciate the work done so far, which is a very positive step to address when we say we are fixing municipalities, local government, all the issues entailed in this proposed review of local government white paper. If they can be achieved, we'll have better municipalities which are better positioned to champion the interests and aspirations of their own localities. So with that, we wish to thank you, DG and the team, and honorable members, thank you for your time. I extended to by 15 minutes after our finishing time of 1 o'clock. I wish to apologize for that. But anyway, we have benefited a lot from these deliberations. They were very important for us as a select committee on CoGTA. Yes, we are invited to the stakeholder engagement, which will take place on Tuesday at Johannesburg. Unfortunately, our budget does not allow for all members to go and participate, so the chair will go and represent you, unless if members feel strong that they can use their tickets. They won't sleep, they fly early in the morning and come back to Cape Town on Tuesday. That is more than welcome. So members can indicate to Mr. Manele if they want to do so. We can make such arrangements. Thank you very much, honored members. The meeting is now adjourned, and thank you to all participants.